And then scarves don't work for me.
Oh no.
Yeah, gailies. I used to wear gaily all the time
Uh-huh.
when I was younger,
Uh,
and all through college. As a matter of fact, my parents were so pissed
oh,
that I took my senior picture. So I'm sitting up in the yearbook with the gaily.
oh really?
My mother was off. I mean, she was off the the rail on that one.
Wow, wow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I refused. I had a huge afro, and I was the only girl in my family for two generations that wasn't in the West Palm Beach cotillion.
Oh, really?
Because they told me I had to straighten my hair, I could wear my afro.
Oh,
And I told them, no, I'm not
right,
doing that.
right,
And
right.
my parents were on, you know,
Uh-huh.
on. But I wasn't gonna do it.
Right, I
Just
know.
on the principle of the thing. I mean, my mother for days was I had come home for Christmas, she had gotten a dress and all that stuff, and I had a date. And then them Negroes come telling me I had to straighten my hair.
Wow. That's messed up. Wow.
I mean, they were and you know,
Every black girl has a hair story.
I know.
Right,
And I wasn't straightening my hair.
right, right.
I mean, it would have been very easy. And my mother was running around for days going, it's just easy if you let Miss So and So put a warm comb to it and then you could roll it.
Uh-huh.
What are you talking about? I'm not doing it.
You said you grew up in West Palm, Florida?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. And that had a large black population.
I'm sorry, did they have a what?
Large black population.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
Hmm.
I'm fifth generation. My great grandfather was a pioneer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Great.
Hey, Venita.
Hey,
Hi, how are you?
Christina, how are
Uh,
you?
I'm good. One second, something's going on.
Okay.
Okay,
What we eating tonight, Venita?
that's
I want
2020.
I want you to know. I went to the Walgreens to get the pistachios.
Oh, you go,
Wait,
girl.
the other night I was eating the last of it, and I said, "Oh heck no, uh, this can't be." And I said, "Oh, it's just pistachios," but I love pistachios, and I can
Mm.
eat the big bag. I could eat that big bag in two sittings, three sittings.
Mhm.
And I had run out, but I said, "Oh no, not tonight."
Okay. That's that 2020 stuff going on.
Yeah,
and I
I
guess
guess
we
so.
need another minute or two to.
Okay.
I heard from Kim. She's running about 20 minutes late.
Okay.
Um, but I don't really know about anybody else.
Okay.
Um, I did hear last week after the meeting from both Nicole and Geo said she was really going to try to be here tonight. We also may get a visit from my big brother,
Oh, good.
who has been listening to the Audible version
Oh,
of
really?
Caste. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, I
So,
want y'all to know that my former neighbor, who lived right next door to me, and she had moved here like the week before I moved, and she was from New Hampshire. And after a year, she said, "No, I cannot do this," and went back to New Hampshire. And I never knew her before this. And she is reading the book. and she's one of the white girls is like a drama queen anyway. And she every night she calls me and she says, my soul hurts. I don't know what to do. I said, you got a lot of money. Send $2,500 to the memorial, the Equal Justice Initiative Memorial. That's what you do.
That's a good I like that.
And it was my response. I might have responded differently if I hadn't read one of these chapters. And so she did.
Mm-hmm. Do you live in a condo or a house?
No, I live in a house.
Oh,
you all want to see my Christmas tree?
yeah.
Christmas tree.
Aww.
Cool.
Yeah.
Kwanzaa table.
Very nice.
Outside on nights that I'm not at book club, as my grandson calls it, the book club. He can't call me because I'm in my book club. I sit outside. I have a courtyard going this way and a patio going that way. The patio's off the kitchen and the living room. And the house it's a villa. So the house is kind of like backwards, like you walk into what people call down here the Florida room. And then you have to go in the, you probably see this door behind me, and that door to go to the major part of the house is real backwards. So anyway, the courtyard is where I have my garden. I mean, I have gardening plants on my patio, but it's where I dig in the ground. And so that's where I usually, like this morning, I was reading out there at 7:45 in the morning. I live in a gated community, which I never really had much thought about it, but I'm glad that I do.
Right.
People don't just show up at your door,
All
which is,
right.
I never thought about that, but it really is a convenience.
Right. Well, I'm going to talk to you later about, because I'm thinking about retiring to Florida, and I was thinking it'd be better to be in a condo as opposed to a house.
Well, okay, we can talk about it. Yeah. I've never lived in a condo, so.
Right.
Why don't we go ahead and get started, Karen, because I hadn't heard from anybody else. So.
All right. Well, thank you for. Can you hear me? Thank you for joining me this evening. Two things. The internet have been acting up all day. So my nieces, they do virtual schooling, so they've been like kicked out. So just in case I get kicked out, I'll just let you know. And then plus, I'm supposed to be watching them because their parents are out. So I'm listening out for them as well as I do pressure. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm Karen Johnson, and we're reading Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, and this is my book. Okay. Michelle, would you go next?
Yeah, I am Logan Michelle Odom, located in Brooklyn, New York. And we are 1 week away from the end of this book. You can find all of the videos of our discussions on it on YouTube under the name the Global Black Feminist Reading Circle.
BJ?
I'm BJ P. Graham, and I'm located in Palm Beach County, Florida. And this is my book. And it didn't give me too much pain this week. Pain, but not a lot.
Thank you.
Good.
Venita?
Hi, my name is Venita Walker, and I'm joining you from Connecticut. And here's my ticket into the book circle.
Thank you. And Gio?
Hey
Gio?
everyone, trying to get myself together. Hey everyone, my name is Georgette Moses, and I'm joining you guys from Columbia, South Carolina. And here's my ticket into the meeting.
Great. So this evening we are in part 6 of the book, and part 6 is titled Backlash, and I had chapters 26, 27, and oops, I made a mistake. I don't know why I put down 12, but anyway, 28. And so the summary is, and I'll read the summary for chapter 26. So in part 6, Backlash, Wilkerson identifies key themes that reveal the backlash, resurgence, and symbols of caste in recent years. In chapter 26, Wilkerson's central argument is caste is an enduring variable in American life and politics. She maintains that no aspect of American life can be fully understood without considering caste and embedded hierarchy. Wilkerson uses US politics, and particularly the 2016 Trump presidential election, as a way to illuminate how US politics, caste, and whiteness intersects to ensure white racial solidarity and dominance within the caste hierarchy. She notes that after 2016 election, journalists, news pundits, cultural critics, historians, etc., failed to understand why the majority of the white voters, especially the disenfranchised, uneducated, working class, poor, and white women of all classes, voted for Trump, the candidate who did not represent their class or gender interests. But as Wilkerson explains, the assumption that the white electorate voted against their self-interests when they voted for Trump diminishes the agency and caste-oriented principles of said group. According to her analysis, white voters did in fact vote their self-interest because the larger goal of the white electorate, as she explains, is to maintain the dominant caste status and their survival in the long term. Thus, whiteness is a salient and central component of American politics. Would somebody like to read chapter 27? Would somebody like to read chapter 27?
I'll read it for you.
Thank you.
Okay. In chapter 27, The Symbols of Caste, Wilkerson explains how the symbols of caste and white supremacy are revealed in flags, plaques, busts, US postal stamps, schools, street names, and statues of Confederate figures, such as Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, Jefferson Davis across this nation. In fact, there are more than 1,700 Confederate monuments in the US. She notes that while the Confederates may have lost the Civil War, in several decades that followed the war, the Confederacy would manage to take hold of the public imagination via films such as Gone with the Wind and Birth of a Nation, and via the previously mentioned public institutions and statues. She argues that these symbols were a naked forewarning to the lowest caste of its subjugation and powerlessness for many decades to come. As Wilkerson explains, while the Confederacy may have lost the war, their enduring power of white supremacy meant retribution and even harder times to come for African Americans, members of the lowest caste. In this chapter, Wilkerson juxtaposes how Germany disremembers the victims and oppressors of the Nazi Holocaust to how the US disremembers the Confederate white supremacist enslavers and descendants of the enslaved.
Thank you. So we have a new participant. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good evening. I'm Mark Odom. I'm Michelle Odom's brother.
Mark, do you have the do you have the video on? Because I'm getting some feedback.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Somebody's got noise in the background. Okay. Sorry, Mark.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Mark, do you have the
So thank you for joining us, Mark. We're looking forward to your contribution to our discussion tonight.
No, I don't think so.
All right. Leonie has joined us.
Wait a minute.
Wait a minute. Let me hear Mark again. I didn't hear his introduction. Mark, your name and your location.
I'm Mark Odom. I'm in Vero Beach, Florida.
Well, welcome.
Hey.
And I think he mentioned he's my big brother.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're looking forward to you being a participant tonight. And Leonie?
Mark, your name and your location.
I'm Mark Odom. I'm in Vero Beach, Florida.
Sorry, is anyone
Leonie
else
here?
getting? I'm here.
Yeah.
Is anyone else getting that feedback?
Yeah, I'm
I
getting
am.
the feedback also.
I think it might be. I think it might be from Mark's. So can we just mute to him and see if it stops? It's picking up somewhere. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, let's everybody mute for a minute and see what happens. And
Yeah.
while Leonie gives her introduction.
Sorry, Michelle, do you have on the YouTube video running at all? On the back end of YouTube?
I'm going to log out.
Okay. Okay, that seems to have fixed it. I don't know how.
Yeah.
Oh, he must have had the YouTube video running.
You might have connected.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, I think he had the YouTube video running, so that was it. So sorry, I don't know where we're at right now.
He was watching us before.
That's what it was.
Yeah,
That's what it was.
Leonie, we're at your introduction.
Okay, so welcome. Hello, everybody. I'm Leonie Smith. I'm joining you from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. This is my ticket in, my copy of Caste, and it's good to see you all. Good to be with you all again.
All right, thank you. So, and would somebody like to read the summary for chapter 28?
I'll read it.
Okay.
In chapter 28, during the summer of 2014 and 2015, Wilkerson notes that it seemed like the US was being unmasked with its high levels of police violence and white national violence against Black people and other people of color and against Jews. For Wilkerson, she felt like the nation had hearkened back to the 1880s, which was a long period of suppression. She writes, if people were given the choice between democracy and whiteness, how many would choose whiteness? For Wilkerson, in this nation, we have entered into a period where the idea of democracy is no doubt on the ballot.
Okay, thank you. So for question 1, in chapter 26, in efforts to support her argument that whiteness is a key component in US politics, Wilkerson cites political scientist Professor Ashley Jardina. Jardina argues that many whites possess a sense of racial identity and are motivated to protect their group's collective interests and to maintain its status. White racial solidarity influences many whites' worldview and guides their political attitudes and behavior. With that said, in the recent 2020 presidential election, discuss the ways in which whiteness and the dominant caste perspectives and behaviors provide us with insights and a blueprint of whiteness and caste hierarchy in US politics. Would somebody like to answer that?
Oh, Venita, looks like you're talking, but you're muted.
Me?
No, Venita.
Oh.
You're muted.
Before we get started, since Mark is not aware of the circle rules, I'd like to go over them. It takes like 2 seconds. Each person has 3 minutes to express their thoughts or answer questions. After 3 minutes, the buzzer will go off. If you require more time, you can ask for another minute. It's not a problem. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think I would say on 1A that, you know, just the fact that Donald was a viable candidate throughout the election season is a statement on whiteness. He was a viable candidate despite everything he's done in office, despite things that are in recent memory. None of it seemed to pose any real threat to the possibility that he could win. Thank God he didn't.
I think the whole counter movement of people rejecting the election results, of white people rejecting the election results, is very much an indicator of this, because when Wilkerson talked about in I think it was chapter, 26 or something, when she was talking to Gwen Ifill and said, and this is when Donald Trump was running to be president the first time, and she said this is about 2042, that you see how powerful white people will lobby in order to protect their interests, which is about being white. Because the curious thing the thing that I find actually curious and fascinating about this idea of white identity is that it's white identity that's defined in the void. It's not about this is what whiteness is. It's about whiteness is not that. And so here you have, people rejecting the election results, not accepting, simple math. It's not that hard. One person, one vote kind of thing. Going to extremes, people praying for the election results to change. People, of course, because it's America, using extraordinary violence in order to try and undermine the election results. There's nothing complicated about the fact that the Republican Party is an anti-democratic party. It's very plain. So for me, this is evidence of the very thing that was named in the question. Complete.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, for me, the 2020, I think an overarching theme about how he rose to political prominence despite his history is that he spoke to the heart of whites who needed a voice, who were urgently thirsting for a voice of whiteness and white supremacy.
All right, thank you. So, so we definitely see how whiteness and the dominant caste perspectives definitely play a role in the politics of this country. And when we talk about democracy, we really had to unpack that even more deeper, because we do live in a corporate capitalist society, and that this society is more, even though we dream of a democracy, it is part of our constitution, but in reality, we live in a consumer-oriented corporate capitalist society that is about upholding the dominant class, that is about upholding whiteness. And it has been, and this has been from the very beginning. And so even though Black people and perhaps other people of color have consistently fought in this country from the very beginning for a true democracy, have challenged this nation, you know, from, I'm thinking about the days of enslavement, where you have people like David Walker, Mariah Stewart, for example, particularly David Walker, and I want to take David Walker as an example, who wrote the appeal to the colored people, challenging, unpacking the Constitution and challenging it. And so it is, I argue, when we look at our history as Black people, we are the ones that have been pushing for a truly democratic nation. But it has always been problematic. Anyone else want to respond
Indeed.
and share their thoughts?
Let's welcome Nicole. Nicole, are you there? You're muted.
Yes, I'm here, guys. My internet is not stable. I don't know if it's the anyway, the hour. I'm not sure. Something's weird happening. But anyway, guys, I'm Nicole Wilson, joining from Houston, Texas. Glad to be here.
Welcome.
Well, happy to have you. Wish we could
Nicole.
see you.
All right. So, any other comments, or should I'm going to go on to B if we don't have any other comments. In chapter,
I do have one comment about democracy, and it has been the capitalists and those who thirst for power and control of the government in order to serve their interests, who have been quite confused and created a great deal of chaos throughout the history of this country about what democracy means. The other part of it is that if you look at the foundation, the other point I'd like to make, if you look at the foundation of what was used to create the theme and identification of this republic as a democracy, it is the Constitution of the United States that essentially invoked and set fundamentally a foundation for this country based on whiteness and wealth, and making place, as Wilkerson further makes the point, making the place even for the lowest part of their own society to have space.
okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to be in chapter 26. Wilkerson argues in a caste context, the two main political parties, Democrats and Republicans, bear the advantages and burdens of the caste they most attract and with which they are associated. At times, the stigma and double standard attached to disfavored minorities have accrued to the Democrats, while the privilege and latitude accorded the dominant caste has accrued to the Republicans, who have come to be seen as proxies for white America. White support has intensified for Republicans, now seen as the party of an anxious but powerful dominant caste electorate. Please provide your personal and professional assessments or perspectives of the above statement that I just read. Additionally, no doubt the two parties are divided by race. Still, is it possible to resolve these race, caste, and political divides? President Obama hoped to engage in bipartisan politics. And President-elect Biden also states he wants to bring both parties together. But is it possible? How does Wilkerson chapter help us think about whether or not this is possible?
BJ's show on last Saturday. Mark, BJ has a blog talk radio program called Our Common Ground with Janice Graham.
Yes, of course.
I'm friends with Mark on Facebook.
Yes.
Oh, and y'all living in the same state too.
And welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
And last Saturday, one of the things that she was talking about that I think really helps us think about this question is a meeting that Joe Biden had with some civil rights leaders. So I'm not, BJ, maybe you want to take it from there.
Well, it was an hour and 40 minutes. And thank you, Michelle. I like the idea that somebody's talking about something I talked about last Saturday night, because I don't remember myself. No one. But Joe Biden had a meeting with quote unquote, and I want Venita, take this off my 3 minutes, because I just want to prefix my description of this meeting. I am so sick and tired of white people pulling people out of the crowd, Black people out of the crowd, and saying, okay, this is your leadership. And this administration has already made that mistake. But anyway, last Thursday, there was a meeting of the quote unquote civil rights leadership, which included Congressman Richardson, Cheryl Eiffel, who I will underscore as a civil rights leader, and some other folks. I mean, you know, I resent the fact that Barbara Arnwine was not in that meeting, but anyway, and some other people weren't in that meeting. And he reared his very ugly white man voice and power over these people and talked to them as though they were little kids who came to visit from the Montessori preschool down the street. When I heard it, somebody called me and said, it's been leaked. And I felt, and in this meeting, they were asking him for some very reasonable kinds of things, asking him to come into this administration and use his power to resolve some very critical issues and problems faced by the Black community, having to do with gun control, having to do with the federal executions that crazy man, madman Trump has undertaken, and some other things around police reform, things that he could do by executive order. And I was mindful when this person who called me to tell me that somebody had deleted audio of this Zoom meeting. I thought the most important thing about it was that it was leaked. And I think not because any of those people, the people who were in the room, the Black people who were in that room are people with integrity. They did not leak that audio. And it's on our at our studios on Blog Talk Radio, the whole hour, 40 minutes if you want to listen to it. But this man talked to them as this is Cheryl Eiffel. That's like Thurgood Marshall as far as I'm concerned. Melanie Campbell. Stacey Abrams wasn't in the meeting. But there were a couple others, people who I never heard of, and I've been doing talk radio for 34 years. But anyway, and the point was that I was trying to make to my listeners on Saturday night was oftentimes we have to take off the gloves, as Alpha would say, take off the gloves and go for the jugular. And those people should have walked away, just like Venita does when she get ready to eat dinner or whatever she's eating over there, and we all the rest of us starving. Click, click, click. Come back when you have found out who brought you to this dance. And they didn't do it. They sat there. And I like to watch the video of it. Black people with dignity, Black people who have achieved, Black people who have done things that Joe Biden would never be able to figure out how to do in his entire life. They were sitting there and they didn't know what to do. And he sent that out. I'm putting it on Joe Biden. He sent, I try not to say those things because people get all upset and stuff. I didn't say it on Saturday night, but he leaked that audio and that video so that his white people would know what niggas he put in charge, he's in charge of, and who's in charge. He did that for whiteness. He didn't, those people didn't, everybody's going around saying they leaked it. So anyway, that's what happened.
Wow. Well, Venita, I forgot to tell you, I yielded my 3 minutes to be sure.
Yeah, she gave me her 3 minutes, and then I borrowed 3 minutes from Mark. And then Leonie was telling me like this, so I took her 3 minutes.
You know what? I'm gonna let you slide, BJ, because you've been good. You've been very good lately. Yes. Okay, so I'm gonna give this one to you because you've been good.
Thank you, love. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
All right. Anybody else? How does her chapter help us understand? What was the question I had? Help us think about whether or not when we talk about when we look at the assessment, when we assess that the Democrats and the Republicans, and the Democrats are supposed to be for minoritized communities and the Republicans represent whiteness, even though Biden is supposed to try a bipartisan, quote unquote, kind of way of dealing in politics, how does her chapter understand what we could predict in the future? Thank you, BJ, for your comment.
I mean, I think the chapter helps us understand that if Biden is not able to forge this bipartisan consensus, that it most likely has to do with issues that are, this is not regular politics. These are not regular times that we're in. And if whiteness and the sphere of 2042 is what's driving all of this madness, then I think this chapter helps to give us a way of kind of comprehending what's going on here.
Thank you. Anyone else? Venita, it looked like you wanted to say something.
No, I'm pretty set.
Okay.
What's on your mind, Mark?
Well, I'm just listening to the fascinating conversation. I'm probably a little ahead of you all in my reading, but I'm listening to it via Audible. I was behind you, and then I got ahead of you. I have had ongoing conversations with my sister about Caste. It's a remarkable book. It's for me, how it traces it. The whole system, how it evolved from basically from an ancient system to keep people segregated into something that has manifested itself into what we call racism today. As one of the things that was very pointed to me is that Italians and Irish they were Italians and Irish until they got to the U.S. When they got to the U.S., all of a sudden they became white folks, Caucasians, and they were relegated to a higher caste, if you will, and that has evolved into the very troubled political situation that we have today, that we're facing today. I look at the Trump phenomena more like as a cult than I do as a legitimate political party. So anyway, that's all I have to say. So thank you.
Anybody else? Leonie, Gio, Nicole?
Well, you guys made me think about, with all of your comments, about this brief interview I watched today of the author Ijeoma Oluo. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. But she wrote, so you want to talk about race, and then this year she has another book coming out called Mediocre, about the dangers of white male mediocrity. But she made a statement about the pyramid scheme of white supremacy. And so this chapter, and indeed this whole book, really breaks down, that con game, where it came from and how it's still affecting us. But after BJ's comment about Biden's clandestine interview, then he supposedly had leaked, talking to, his other base, right? Now, that just seems to me like, well, we've got people of color have a pyramid scheme that we're participating in also. And then Mark, when he brought in the terminology of cult, how are we also contributing? We're still participating in a cultish-like mentality. We're hoping for change, something different. Please give us this crust of bread you promised us. We did our part, and yet, we still get kicked to the curb. And I assume a bunch of people who naysay, why are you giving Biden your vote? And said, oh, well, this is what you deserve. What did you expect was going to happen? Are feeling probably justified when they hear these kind of things come out. But to the question, how does, or just whether or not we think it's possible to actualize what true democracy is ever, when the power is never equal, and when we have this cultish mentality about where we fit in the scheme of things, in the hierarchy. You have the people who consider themselves white, wholesale buying into, I am of value because I belong to this group, even though I really have no power. And the thousands, hundreds of thousands of Trump, supporters who are out there at the White House lawn saying, no, he really won. They can't give it up. They won't, they don't even admit the realities. Or maybe they don't even recognize what reality is anymore. I don't know. But it's very disconcerting that here we are again. It doesn't matter who gets elected. Here we are again. We gave you our blood, sweat, and tears. I hope our children. And here we are again, fighting for the same, basic, stop shooting us, okay? Get rid, stop charging us too much for student loans. Give us mortgages that we can afford. The same stuff. So I don't know if it will ever be possible until you actually deconstruct the system that keeps the same people in power forever. So that's my
I want to pose a question in response to Georgette. And that question is something that's in front of me all the time. And that is whether or not what might be indicative of our capacity to break through the system of white supremacy in this country is reflected in the fact that even Jews from Germany who came here sought to be white, and they are not. We talked about this some weeks back. The idea that Jewish German immigrants came to this country and joined the cult of whiteness. And what does that say to us as a people? Because Mark Lee already said, and he's in Congress, he's an asshole, but he's in Congress. He already said the point is not democracy. The Federalist Society has already made the point that the point of the matter is not democracy. The Constitution, the Federalists will tell you over and over and over, and I've heard enough of them, that even in the Federalist Letter number 10 by James Madison establishes a republic, not a democracy. That's their banner. So where are we? I'm sorry, Georgette.
No, that's fine.
I mean, I don't want it to seem like I'm saying in response to what you said, that we ain't never gonna be free. But
well, will we? I don't know. We keep trying. That is in our DNA. We will not stop. And maybe that's what it takes. How long? I don't know, but we cannot stop.
Keep hope alive.
All right, in question 1, part C, what are your reflective and observational thoughts on the following statements? Wilkerson says that Caste gives insight into the Democrats' wishful yearning for white working class voters that they believe should respond in higher numbers to their kitchen table appeals. On the other hand, the Republicans' reverence for its base of white evangelicals stands in stark contrast to the indifference often shown the Democratic base of African Americans who are devalued for a host of reasons, among them their suppressed status at the bottom of the social hierarchy. What are your reflective thoughts on those two statements? especially when we think about how, and we saw this, we always see this in the elections, especially in this recent election, when we see consistently this strong appeal on the part of the Democrats to what they consider the working class, not considering the fact that people of color are also working class, but this yearning for white working class voters that they believe should also vote for them. And on the other hand, the Republicans holding and standing in stark contrast to the indifference often shown the Democrats' base by African Americans who are devalued for a host of reasons, among them their suppressed status at the bottom of the social hierarchy. And I also think about what you had said earlier, BJ, how when the civil rights group had met with Biden, and how there was this level of disrespect in terms of how he were addressing the civil rights. I mean, that's another example of how you know that we are going to be there, Black folks. Well, you know what, I'm being honest, I'm more radical progressive in terms of my voting. I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I'm an independent, but I always vote kind of radical left. But this time I did vote on Democrat. But there's this ongoing disrespect of the base, you know? And the fact that the Democrats should be taken in consideration, they should understand that the white voters, majority of them, are going to vote for whiteness. They don't care about the Democrats. They don't care. They're not voting for their self-interest. They're voting to perpetuate whiteness. And there is not that understanding. Whereas Black people and other people of color are voting to push this country towards a true democratic creed. But there's this level of devaluing this group. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so I have something on this.
Okay.
Which is that the very one, in the way that when people think Republican, they think white, people forget that when you think Democrat, you should also think white.
Thank you.
Okay.
The Democratic Party is still a white supremacist dominant party. Right. And you think about where the conversation is happening on the left, it's left of the Democratic Party, which isn't really left politically. As I've said before, the Democratic Party is to the right of the Conservative Party in Canada.
Yes. Right.
So,
thank you.
And many conservative parties in many parts of the Western world that have the kind of democracies that America says it has. The other thing to keep in mind, and I would like someone to tell me this because I honestly do not know, when exactly did the Democrats state that they were the party for Black people?
Right. Well,
when was that explicit? Because I know people talk about Kennedy, but Kennedy, it was a political move. I don't know if you could point to John Kennedy and be.
It was tied to Franklin D. Roosevelt. That's when you start seeing that shift moving towards the Democratic Party. But
it was Franklin D. Roosevelt and
I would also
anti-racist. Nicole. Yeah. Also, I'd love to hear what your piece is too. It's a genuine question. Did at any point, where do you all point to say that the Democratic Party became a pro-Black party?
Right. So this first start, and I'm going to let Nicole answer as well. The first start, you started seeing the shift with Franklin D. Roosevelt. Then you also started seeing the shift with Lyndon B. Johnson. In terms of that shift towards the Democrats. And then I think, and Nicole, do you want to respond?
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say that there was also this kind of deliberate move for Black folks to also claim this party. And I also always have to bring us back to Southern Black organizers, the Fannie Lou Hamers and so forth with the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. The ways in which, it's certainly rhetorical, but also, just grassroots organizing to say that this is our party, and this is not just symbolic, and that we are going to have the representation and a voice. And so oftentimes, people overlook what occurred there because they were, people kind of read it as a kind of rhetorical performance, a performance rhetoric, if you will. But that was, organizing and bringing attention to this age-old notion and this thing that we're still kind of turning over, that white men cannot speak, for everyone's interest. And the fact that those people, though it was a multiracial coalition there, an alliance, if you will, but those individuals were very bold and vocal in saying that this party also belongs to us. This is also our party, claiming, the Democratic Party as well, to answer you, Leonie, and and the Southern, just cruelty and violence that they were repeatedly, those folks, and of course, Fannie Lou Hamer always represented the Delta, Mississippi Delta, but those folks were saying, again, what Malcolm X was telling us, this is taxation without representation. Um, turning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But Leonie, from a living, breathing view, I am old enough to remember when that shift happened. And Mark and Michelle and Georgette, y'all know, and Venita, it really, keep in mind that those Black people who were able to vote, and they were primarily above the Mason-Dixon line, were registered by white people, and white people registered them as Republicans. But when Kennedy came along, Kennedy was running against an opponent who had done, and Black people who followed politics at the time, who they found offensive. And they also found offensive that people who were Republicans, who had been Democrats, what they call them,
the Dixiecrats.
The Dixiecrats, coming out of the Democratic Party in response to Truman. And then Black people stayed in because they believed in Eisenhower. And then when Kennedy came along, Kennedy actually uttered the word Negro. I remember as a kid sitting at my dining room having dinner with my parents, who at the time that Kennedy came along were Republicans. And my parents talking about why and how they could not vote for Richard Nixon and what Kennedy was going to do. And also we lived in Palm Beach County, and so there was an affection in that part of Florida for Kennedy because they lived in Palm Beach. Their winter home was in Palm Beach. So I think it was a mishmash of things that happened. And when the Dixiecrats started moving into the Republican Party, they turned up the fire in the South. They were taking farms from Black farmers. They were moving people off of the migrant farms. And there was a lot of terror during that period. And some of it had to do with the threat of, don't you ever think you're going to be able to vote? So Black people started migrating to the party that also had Black representatives. Don't forget, Kennedy's administration had Black people in the administration that were working in the White House. And I know that because they couldn't stay in a hotel in Palm Beach County, so they had to stay at our house. Mr. Brown or whatever his name was, and Mr. somebody else, whatever his name was. When Kennedy came to Palm Beach, he brought his staff, and they couldn't stay in the hotel. They certainly couldn't stay in whatever the hotel is over there in Palm Beach. So a lot of things were happening. Leonie, you get the picture? Aside from the scriptural history, there were things that were really going on in the lives of Black people, and Black people were starting to have some hope that they could maybe get in on the deal somehow.
Thank you.
I love the question, Leonie, and correct me if I'm wrong. I love that you're saying when did Democrats.
Excuse me. Kim, let's have your introduction, please.
Can I just finish my sentence if you don't mind?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kim, and I'm from New York. And what I was saying was that I love the idea that you asked the question, when did the Democrats become pro-Black? And I don't think we think of the Democrats as pro-Black. I think that we think of them as not anti-Black.
Okay.
Oh, that's a good point. I appreciate that. That's a big difference. Thank you.
And anti-Black has to be a gradient because they definitely are anti-Black.
Yeah, and
Leonie, I knew you were going to get that in.
Yeah, and I wanted to come back to that.
It's just the difference between being in the fire and being in the pot. You know,
yes.
I think that's
right.
the difference.
Yes.
How are you going to cook?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I wanted to come back to that absolutely because I understood Leonie's sarcasm there, but also just to speak to Karen's larger question that here we are, and let's be specific even, overwhelmingly Black men and Black women as a voting bloc, Black people, we are, of course, supporting the Democratic Party. And in popular culture discourse, the national discourse, we hear folks saying, oh, yeah, they just take us for granted and so forth. But what Wilkerson does for us is allow us to understand, well, this is deeper than that, right? There's this devaluing, and it's going to continue. And I mean, and I just really, again, I want to, here's the difficulty here, the challenge that I have. Yes, we're talking racial caste, but also the class, right? The fact that when folks can't pay for what they want, who has to answer to them? We know and we understand how wealth and the trifecta here, the corporations, the policing, the militarized police. I mean, we understand how all these things take care, these systems take care of each other. One supports the other, right? And then there's that fragmentation because we do have wealthy Blacks or the so-called Black elites. I mean, whose interests do they really, represent? I don't think Black elites speak for me. I certainly don't feel supported by Black elites. I mean, as much as I love Beyonce and some of the other celebrities, here we are at the height of protests, summer 2020, the pandemic and then this racist ass policing. And the best that our Black celebrity class can come up with is, oh, we just got to get more Black businesses. Like we can't business ownership our ways out of this oppression, right? I don't even understand the logic. And to me, that's such a shallow framework. It's a shallow framework when we're talking about, again, as I'm going through Karen's questions, death zones and death traps that we are continually finding, ourselves in this afterlife of slavery. And again, again, great questions, Karen. But oh my gosh, I'm just, it's just a reality for me. We're not, yeah, we're not there. We're just not there. All right, I'll
So I want to go to 2 because I'm looking at the time and it went by fast. We're having good discussions. In chapter 27, reflect on these 2 passages and share your critical thoughts. I liked these 3 chapters that I had to do, more so 26 and 27. 28 was real short, but I really was fascinated with chapter 27, and I like how she did, she juxtaposed the US, United States, with Germany in terms of how they remember and disremember, right? That's what I really appreciated that, because I walked away saying, wow, I never thought about how Germany remembers and disremembers those who have been victimized by the Nazis and those who have engaged in the victimization, as opposed to how the US does that, right? And also the US, we have yet to apologize for enslaving 11 million Africans were kidnapped from the continent and brought to on the transatlantic slave trade. And we have yet to recognize and acknowledge the fact that that this nation, the economic engine of this nation, was built off of the backs of enslaved people, right? And so until we do that, I argue, we're always gonna have engaged in this crisis that we're doing, we have. So in chapter 27, reflect on the 2 passages and share your thoughts. In America, the men who mounted a bloody war against the United States to keep the right to enslave humans for generations went on to live out their retirement in comfort. And then we compare that to Germany. Germany has no monuments that celebrate the Nazi armed forces, rather than honor supremacists with statues on pedestals. Germany choose to erect memorials to victims of its aggressions and to the courageous people who have resisted the men who inflicted atrocities on human beings. And I just want to say one thing. I don't know, I know a lot of people hate Milena Karenger, but in his book, Introduction to Black Studies, he uses the term the Holocaust of enslavement. And that we need to look at the Holocaust as, a dehumanizing, evil kind of force and system. And when we look at the Holocaust, we need to also use that term when it comes to the enslavement of people in this country. He breaks it down in terms of how he defined it, right? And so then that's why I appreciate how she compares the U.S. and how we remember and disremember those who have been victimized, right, by the moral monster of slavery. Anyway, what are your thoughts? I want to hear you all's thoughts on this, particularly on that chapter.
I have given it some thought, Karen, because my son was married to a white German woman.
Right.
So I was always curious about, what the differences were, because I absolutely detect a difference in her from white people that I've known, in her and her family.
Okay.
From white people that I've known in the States. And I suspect that one of the key differences, well, she had told me about, how they really incorporate the memory of the Holocaust into everyday life there. But I suspect that a part of their ability to do that has to do with color, with skin color.
Yeah, exactly.
That even though Jews may not technically be white until they come to this country, for on a visual basis, they tend to be closer to white skin color than most of us are. And so I think that just allows regular white folks to have a level of identification and compassion, and remorse and regret that they're not able to feel for their darker skinned brothers and sisters.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I concur. It's exactly what I was thinking. Exactly. That's why now you have so much colorism. You always have, and not just here in other countries, to look as close as European as you possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they can identify. White folks always can identify with folks that look closer to themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But so that's, no matter what we do, we will never, in this United States of America, whether it's now or 500 years from now, get the empathy that another human can get if they look and appear closer to what white society finds appealing and worthy of value, respect, and empathy.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I think for me, I remember reading somewhere that Lincoln said that the Civil War had nothing to do with slavery. It was to save the Union.
Right.
Was.
And that he was not concerned with slaves in the way that we make it seem like the Civil War was to help stop slavery the way I guess World War II helped to stop the Holocaust or ended the Holocaust. I think we're comparing apples and oranges.
Okay.
And when Lincoln talks about he wanted to save the Union, he also felt that white people were better than Black people.
Mm-hmm.
So at no point has America came together to say, we got to stop this.
Mm-hmm.
The Civil War did not say to any one white man, let's stop this.
Right.
So I hear what is reading, what she's saying in Caste, but I don't think that that was accurate history. I wish she had really gotten into the meat of the nut in terms of what the Civil War actually stood for, because now we're going back and saying, let's get rid of all of these war histories, this particular history, when that was our history. And so the goal was to braid the South and the North back together. And that was the goal. The goal had nothing to do with, undoing the hurt that had been done to us.
Right. And so I totally agree with you, Kim.
Right.
That's what
And
the
I
war
would,
was about. But the war, we also have to understand, and even on the part of the enslaved people, they understood that the war was indeed about slavery. It was about the Southern slaveocracy maintaining slavery. And it was about the Union soldiers really dismantling it because it was no longer profitable. Okay, because the North was now emerging towards a system of immigrants moving in. You have factories in. So now it was moving into a different kind of economic system where it was in competition with one that depended on the free labor of enslaved people who was in fact also sabotaging the system, right? And so the two were in conflict, and when we study capitalism, we see how the two were in conflict with each other. But and like you said, Lincoln, who also was a racist, but he did not care about the enslaved people. It was about dismantling it because he did not like slavery, but it was also about moving towards this other economic system that was emerging because of slavery, right? The cotton is going up to the north to be produced in the factories, which give rise to a different kind of economic system that this country was now moving towards being involved in. I'm sorry, Nicole, you wanted to say something?
Can I just
Right.
add?
Well, no, I was just also. Oh, go ahead, Kim.
Oh, thank you, Nicole. I just wanted to add that we're saying the same exact thing, that at no point was it about let's stop hurting this particular group of people. So
Right.
the economic system that you're talking about, when Lincoln says that he's trying to save the Union, we're talking about a system, and we're not talking about people. And I think that's the difference between Germany and the United States, is that Germany was talking about the Jewish people.
Right, okay.
And
Right.
nowhere was Lincoln or anyone who was fighting in the Civil War saying, we're doing this to help these people. But when you got down to the small farmers and those type of people, they looked at every time they lost a soldier, it was our fault, so that they need to find ways to harm us. So I don't know, it just seems like the narrative is just so different.
Okay.
Right. And I don't know enough to speak about it intelligently, but I love what you're saying, Karen, because it helps me to just kind of understand the whole picture better. So I'm sorry, Nicole, go right ahead.
No, actually, Karen had already stated what I wanted to say. And also, I was just making, beyond what she said, the idea of the mythology of America remains intact, right, with World War II and Germany, because, of course, you still get to see these so-called white American heroes in the mythology of these so-called United States. Right, but just what you had already said about um, the economy and the economic shift. Well, I do want to add to, I think, Karen, did you read A, right? You were speaking on A and B.
I can't hear you.
Yeah, so talk about it. Did I read which one?
You had read A and B, correct?
For number 2, I read A. That was A.
Oh, A. Okay. I'll speak up when we talk about B. I'm gonna mute.
Well, we could move. Anybody? No one else have anything? We could move to B. Okay, let's move to B. Nicole.
Yeah, I noticed that you touched on like the statuary, and wow, that's just just a loaded conversation there, and I just wanted to in retrospect, I wanted to see where do we stand now, because you're right, we had if we think back here to summer 2020, spring summer, we dealing with pandemic, and again, can you guys hear me better?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So no, I'm just wondering in retrospect, guys, where do you guys stand? Because Karen kind of mentioned or talked about briefly what happened over the summer, that how these conversations kind of got usurped by a larger conversation around statuary and representation. And of course, the ideology is embedded in the material, the statuary and so forth. But having some distance, slight distance from that, I'm just wondering, where do you all stand? What do you all think? And we already talked about last week how folks grew so tired so quickly of talking about, these kind of Black liberation, if you will. We had the corporations come out and declare Black Lives Matter, and then as soon as this starts occurring, it's let's walk away from that. Let's get out of that conversation quickly And so I'm just kind of wondering, where do you guys stand, just thinking back in retrospect on how those conversations kind of, elided you. And I'm gonna
Well, if you remember, it really started with Bree Newsom taking down the South Carolina state flag. And from there, people began to evaluate if that is a principle worth supporting, then what do we do with all these statutes that's all over the country? But I felt that they all should have come down because they represent much more than somebody being a hero on the wrong side. But they represent an ongoing an ongoing issue that has not been ugly issue that has not been resolved in this country, and that serves as an impediment and an obstruction to Black people bearing witness on behalf of their ancestors and being able to provide to their children a truthfulness about what justice is. And we have so few examples to point to for our children about what justice is.
Right. And I keep thinking about too, when we, there's no way to talk caste in America and to not continue talking about capitalism and its latest iteration and this neoliberal context, right? And so I'm just thinking through those ways that folks like, I love scholar Georgette, who she talks about, this is why she's saying, I ain't down with necessarily abolition discourse, because who's going to give you justice? That's taken.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody gives you that. And so, I keep, again, I know Afro-pessimism and pessimism in general is so antithetical to feminism, and especially Black feminism, and a futurity in those ways that there's this kind of hopefulness with Black feminism. But I'm not gonna lie, I'm stuck because, this is all around the world, same song. So.
Yeah, and Nicole, I think we're at a place where civil society is simply devolving with great rapidity. With this recent electoral college meeting, people going to the meeting and having to enter through the back door. One of them wore bulletproof vest. Just all kinds of, so just regular things, what seem like regular things that we should be able to protest about, that we should be able to have civil discourse about, just regular things are more and more costing, I think, way more than most people want to pay. I mean, in this chapter, the story about the difficulty, was it Mitch Landrieu that couldn't find a contractor? Mm-hmm. In New Orleans, somebody was car bombed. over this. We're being forced to really, really ask ourselves how much we want a particular thing and how much we are willing to pay to get it.
Right. And I would add to Michelle quickly. Um, and again, I say this, of course, I always, let me preface, let me find a nice way to say this. One thing I love about Dr. Tracy McMillan Cotton and even the piece she wrote about Barack Obama, and she said that, sometimes, and I can place it in a different context, so-called Black elites, and she talked about President Obama, differently, and from a different, in a different context. But regardless, her thesis was that some Black folks don't know their whites. I, being a Southern Black woman, I don't have the luxury to not know my whites. I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked at what happened here in DC with Trump's Proud Boys being able to, wreak havoc. I am not shocked. I'm just not shocked. I know my whites. And it's a catastrophic beauty, if you will, of me understanding and living and breathing and surviving the racist. This nation is what it is, but and Southern institutions. And I because I'm thinking about you guys. These are the same conversations. When I go back to Baldwin, let me go back even, but Du Bois was that these same conversations. What does it mean to how does it feel to be a problem? We are still a problem. And this is I've been thinking about legacy and what I'm bequeathing my children. I I don't. I told you guys I'm getting older, disillusioned, and at least I all the lessons that I've taught them. I keep testing. You've got to know your wife. Don't be shocked. Don't be surprised. I can't. Michelle, when you say we can't even engage in civil discourse. Well, I've never really been able to engage in civil discourse. I mean, this is, these are lessons I learned very early on. And so, anyway, my grandbirds, as you often hear, are chirping.
So I think I'm really liking the conversation around statues that is being generated in the UK, where they have the same issue, nowhere near as, not as prolific, and where they have a similar issue, not the same. And I'm liking, especially Black historian, he's Nigerian and British, named David Olusoga, his perspective on these things, on these statues. And he's like, you don't learn. Statues do not, when you make the argument that this is part of our history, statues are not, walking past a statue in a park is not a place to learn about history. And he makes the argument, I think, quite successfully, that these statues should be in museums where you can talk about things in context. And there's lots of different viewpoints that you can take. Right now people are talking about the statues in the United States as though they are, and there's some as well in Canada. But anyway, to stick to the book, talking about statues in the United States as though the statue is the object that needs to be taken care of and not the whole conversation about it. Like, if it were in a context, you can have a conversation about not only who these individuals were, but also what does it mean that a statue was erected after slavery ended, and how does that and how does it impact people who were targeted? for why the statue was erected. You could even have conversations that are from an artist's perspective. You can have different kinds of conversations that you are not going to have by walking past it in a city park. So I really liked his argument about how that for me took down this question of, well, it's about our history and it's about understanding our history, kind of like good and bad. No, it's like it is an object that is put in a place that has no context. Therefore, it is ahistorical.
But I think one of the complicating factors is the insidiousness, the pervasiveness of the symbols going on here, because it's not just the statues. It's the Robert E. Lee schools and the Washington Lee universities and the U.S. stamps. I was so sick of reading about Robert E. Lee by the time I finished the chapter. It's all of that. And so there's no easy, simple, direct, do this one thing and we'll be making progress strategy for us here.
But it also comes in the context of how especially children grow up in those kinds of environments. I grew up in the segregated South. I didn't know nothing about no statues. I didn't know nothing about no Robert Lee. I went to segregated schools. They didn't teach us that part of the Civil War. They taught us the Civil War of the 54th Infantry of the Union. I didn't have a public exposure to statues, and I mean, I saw Confederate flags, but when there's no Robert E. Lee school in the community where I grew up. But all of those things were things that, and I bring this up because in the Southern Freedom Movement, and segregation, Black children learned Black history. They became, as adults, became numb to when they went to the New York City parks and the Boston parks and the Philadelphia parks and all that. Who are all these people? What are y'all talking about? Or when they went to U.S. history in colleges and universities, what the hell? And, it's just like Black people in the South really didn't teach their children fairy tales. The Grinch and some other thing. I remember when I got in high school and I went to the white high school, I had no idea what they were talking about. They were talking about some fairy tales, and that's not what. So regionally, all of that regionally and generationally, all of that becomes very important as it merges with the generations, with the subset of culture. So I was glad because I knew of the history as a 70-year-old, 60-something-year-old, when they were pulling down statues. If I could help, I would have helped. So, I think that what she does here, she just simply makes the point that we can't continue to walk in their shit and expose our children to their stench.
Yes. And I really like how she points out that in Germany, with people standing on the train station, so I want to say good night to those who have to leave. Thank you, Leonie. Because our time actually is up, so I guess I can stop right here. Thank you all for such a wonderful.
Why are you stopping? You got to go.
Oh,
I was waiting for you to finish your.
I like how she said that when in the subway, in one of the particular subways in Germany, um, you constantly seeing messages of this is what we did. And I loved how she was saying one of the, I don't know if it was a school teacher or a politician was taking the kids to a particular park and talking about what happened in Germany, the Holocaust, and how the kids say, we are not responsible, we weren't alive, but we understand we carry the burden of this so that it will not happen again. And so that is so powerful, because this is what needs to, when we talk about our kids being exposed, but even with white students, and this is what I attempt to do when I teach African American studies, is that I want them to go out of my class understanding African American history and talking about social justice and Black Lives Matter, because it is all of us in terms of moving this nation towards a truly equitable and democratic society, and not one where you can say, oh, it was not me, I'm not racist, what have you, but understanding how, I want them to understand how they bear that burden, how they benefit from whiteness, and that it is their duty to engage in steps to raise their awareness and also engage in activist work to bring down racial oppression, class oppression, etc. And so anyway.
Well, you know, the American Jews.
You make me think about Bell Hooks. And when Bell Hooks talks about a transgressive pedagogy, that she says how it caused us to become more and more engaged.
Yes.
And it's so interesting, Karen, because oh my gosh, you should, and I'm quite sure you have your stories as well. But here in Texas, you should see and just, oh my gosh, to witness the backlash that I receive when I am putting that critical pedagogy before them. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yes. I'm glad you connected that, Bell Hooks, because I am thinking about that. And yes.
And I hadn't read that for years and years and years. And it reminded me, maybe I need to go back and go back to some old readings. Oh my God.
You know, Nicole.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
But you know, I lived for 12 years in a predominantly Jewish community. And you will not find an American Jew who does not utter a minimum of 5 times a week, never forget.
Okay.
Never forget.
Yes.
And I think it's just so important. And Kwanzaa, when my ex-dead husband, do I have to say the part where he dead, or do I have to say the part he had my ex? But anyway, I've been quite confused about that for a while. But we used to celebrate the last day of Kwanzaa when my daughter was young and my grandchildren were young, because his house was part of the Underground Railroad. And one of the activities we had, other than, pouring libation for people that they had been taught about in our families, was to make up names of the people who hid in the cabinets upstairs in the in the attic, and take those names with candles and place the piece of paper in the cabinets where the human beings would hide, because it was part of the Amish New England underground. And I think that we have, and Michelle knows that I've been saying this for you, we have to find a way of teaching our children that they should never forget. And they should always understand that we, through that not forgetting, our part was that we survived.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I have always loved that expression, never forget. Um, but I want to say two things about it. I remember Venita and I and a friend of mine, Bill Peters, did a book group together a few years ago where we were reading one of he's a poet and a book publisher, and we were reading one of his books called Black Mailed, MALED. And I remember us kind of having a conversation about, the importance of trying to transmit this history to our children and, in essence, never forgetting. And I remember Bill disagreeing with that, and feeling like it robs the children of their opportunity to kind of find their own way. Now, he's one of these new agey kind of free-spirited kind of people, but hearing him say it the way that he did stick with me. The other point I want to say about the never forget is I recently saw a documentary, I think it was on Netflix. I watched two of them on Hasidic Jews. And but both of the stories just kind of really reveal how, what on in essence or on the surface is a positive concept of not forgetting your history. Both of the stories kind of reveal how that concept can be bastardized and actually become oppressive to the members of the community. They're really quite chilling. So I don't know. I just go back to what I always say. This is extremely complex stuff we're dealing with.
Well, excuse me if I may say, there's a lot of history to be learned. If I do believe that my children should know their history. However, because we have so many races or nationalities in our family, my great-great-grandfather is a Polish Jew. His name was Stephen Zimmerman. My grandfather's mother was Italian, his father was Jewish. My great-great-grandmother's all-American Cherokee Indian from up the hills of North Carolina. We have Mediterranean. So when we start to talk about history, it's just not Black history. I've been through the Holocaust. I've been through slavery. I've been through genocide, and it's a lot of history that we have to teach, and we're all interconnected. And that's why I still have a hard time with Black folks. It almost feels like we're constantly begging white folks, please feel us, please feel us, please feel us. They don't. Mm-hmm. They're not going to. That's not their plan. They don't give a fuck about us. And I'm just so over it. It's the same way with Biden. I voted for Biden to stay alive for 4 more years. I'm not a Democrat. I'm a registered Democrat, but I voted Republican before against someone to save myself for another 4 years. So, I just don't even know about this conversation. It just goes around in circles. I was listening to my sweetheart, Nicole, and her perspective from living in Texas. Well, I didn't live in Texas. I'm 61 years old. I went to a school during segregation, Edwin M. Stanton School in South Philadelphia. The same thing is happening to all of us now was happening to us then. I witnessed Black guys being killed in the street many times. So it just seems like we constantly going around in circles. And every time someone mentions the name Negro, as someone mentioned before, or Black, we're ready to embrace it. Oh, thank you. I'm over that. I'm so over that because I've been doing it for 61 years, since the damn day I was born. It's a circular conversation. It's that circular need for white folks to notice that we're in pain. Again, Jews say never forget. And the white folks here don't forget because they have economic power. Their skin is white, so they're able to navigate themselves through our capitalistic white folk system, and they have economic power. They own the banks, they own the television stations, their doctor, you name it, they got it. And that's why this country stops and pauses when a Jew says, oh my God, they fart one time, here we go. We don't have, no. If a Jew coughs, this country stops. It says a Jew coughs, let's listen to what they have to say. And that's only because they have economic power and because their skin is white. So no, we will never have the same value or any value. Black lives don't matter to white folk. Recognize it, deal with it, and let's think about some other things because they really don't care. And I know that sounds not being very hopeful. I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist. And I have to teach my sons to be realists because if I don't teach them to be realists, they will be dead. If I taught them that everything is beautiful and one day the rainbows will come and all the kumbaya shit, they will be dead. When they went off to college, I had to teach them from the time they're small, right after they went off to college, and I had to teach them what the real shit that might happen, else they would be dead. When they get out there and go to work every day after they finish college, we still have conversations today because they will be dead. So they have to know. Right. It's important that I tell them. And I'm not trying to kill my children. I would actually feel less than a mother if I didn't tell them the ugly that could happen. Because for the most part, being Black in America, you got more ugly that happen than you ever have happy things or wonderful things happen. We don't live in that colorless society and all that bullshit. Right. And I just think, I'm just so over it. I'm just over it. Black folks just embracing Kamala. Fuck Kamala.
I'm gonna have to put some rose-colored glasses
on.
Kamala.
Kamala. I'm just so sick of it. Everybody's just ready to embrace. She's a part Black and Indian woman. And what about it? And what about it? Barack is Black. And what about it? And I do usually don't rant. As a matter of fact, I say very little.
I know.
I say very little.
I know. But when you speak, you have such a powerful voice. Right. And that is why I have to balance it with another point of view. Right. And that is to say that I do think it's important to some extent that we go round and round in circles, as frustrating as that is. Because there are critical things, critical messages that we clearly have not learned. We clearly are not getting. And just like with any other learning process in life, until you learn, just like I told you all last week, everything is everything. You figure it out in one area of your life, you know the answer in every other area of your life. And when it comes to the lessons that life has to teach us, until you learn them, you keep getting the lesson. You can keep putting your hand in that fire if you want to, but it is going to burn every time. When you learn that, you can stop burning yourself. And so as a people, there's something, and I would say a lot of things, that we're not understanding. We're not really understanding that this situation that we're in this is not love. And that's why I was using the analogy last week with you all about a relationship. You can be in a loving relationship or an unloving relationship. And you have to decide what your bottom line is. You have to decide what your non-negotiables are. If you don't have any, he don't have any.
Uh-oh, that's Southern
All
church
right now.
background
All
of
right
mine.
now.
Michelle, my Southern Black church background. I was doing the Baptist head wag preach.
You know I'm a PK.
Yeah.
I think we're agreeing on two fronts. One is the front that was articulated by Venita, and that is that we're over it. We ain't trying to teach no white people nothing about nothing, because these are lessons that are inconvenient for them. But the other is that we continue to teach ourselves so that we are equipped with an adequate, sufficient toolbox. This book, for instance, is a tool, and it teaches lessons about seeing the congestion, seeing through the congestion. And I just like the idea. As a matter of fact, when I was reading this, tomorrow, I'm gonna go get 20 gold bricks. I mean, well, I can't buy gold bricks, but 20 bricks at the Home Depot, not the Home Depot because I don't buy from Home Depot, at Lowe's, and some gold paint. And I'm gonna put some names on those bricks. And I'm gonna put them in my garden. I mean, I already have stones. You know, I'm the drama queen, Kim.
You're the drama queen.
I'm the drama queen. I already have, for instance, I have rocks. I mean, rocks is big that I took from South Africa, and I had to, and I was scared to death. I gave away a pocketbook and some shoes to take the weight out of my bag so I could bring the rocks. Everywhere I have gone, I have gotten rocks. I even have a rock from Martha's Vineyard, from the beach, from Jones Beach on Martha's Vineyard, and I spray them with polyurethane, and another coating that keeps the texture. So I think we do. I think we need this. Like every year I do a Kwanzaa teach-in on my broadcasts, because I think we need that. We need to feed our spirits. So I think that we have to teach our children. When my ex-dead husband, when he
I'm sorry.
When they sold the house, when my daughter sold the house,
Oh, Lord.
I was worried about, did y'all get the names out of the cabinets?
I'm
What
sorry.
about the names in the cabinets? And that's how I'm a drama person in that regard.
Oh, Lord, have mercy.
I keep
BJ, I'm gonna stop
shoes from all my grandchildren. I got their first pair of shoes, their mama first pair of shoes, and the date that they took their first steps in those shoes. And when
we're gonna stop the video. Excuse me, BJ, we're gonna stop the video because I already cussed people out, and cut that part out. Stop the video.
We're gonna stop the recording and thank Karen. We can stay in the studio, but Karen, thank you so much for these wonderful, evocative.
Look what you brought up. Look what you have up in all of us tonight.
Karen.
Wow.
And Karen,
Yeah.
Karen, I am a lady in spite of those nasty low down words I use.
Oh,
No.
No,
Really?
I understand.
And we will see you all next week reading our story together.
Okay.
So, give me a minute. Give me